Grand Forks, the proud home of the University of North Dakota. This is the time and place for the Grand Forks Growth Fund, a jobs development authority. Begin with a roll call, please.
Weigel. Hasowski. Here. Weber.
Here.
Lunsky. Here. Kavami.
Here.
Sandy. Veen.
Here.
Mayor Buczynski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good, thanks. Item 1.2, election of Vice Chairperson and Secretary Treasurer. These two offices have been held by Representative Ken Veen and Representative Kyle Kavami for the last 2 years. Be looking for any discussion or a motion for a nomination.
I think we're missing. Chairperson, I think we've got, I just got a message. Did you get that, Todd, or is he? We're missing one.
Mr. Sandy's in the waiting room. He said he's on, but in the waiting room, waiting to get into the meeting.
And we're being told he's not in the waiting room yet? Okay.
In the meantime, I'll make a motion for Ken Veen to be the Vice President. That's what you're looking for now?
Very good.
Second.
And a second from Mr. Kavami. Motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Then to the office of Secretary Treasurer, currently held by Representative Kavami.
I'd make a motion to keep Mr. Kavami there if he's willing.
Very good. We have a motion. He looks like he's willing. And a second from Representative Veen. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Very good. A unanimous election for both offices. Thank you, gentlemen, for being willing to serve. Moving on to item 2.1, Aerial Robotics Accelerate Loan Request. Mr. Lund.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the authority. Keith Lund, Grand Forks Region Economic Development Corporation. Congratulations, Ms. Lunsky and Ms. Osowski. Here to talk about Robotics and their Accelerate Grand Forks loan application. The Growth Fund Committee considered their application at their last meeting a few weeks ago now. We did have a fifth Monday in the month. They had applied for Accelerate Grand Forks Loan Program, which is a $250,000 loan to help support their presence in Grand Forks. They're a technology drone service provider and manufacturer, an exciting opportunity for drone manufacturing in Grand Forks. Just as a little bit of a background, they're headquartered, really founded in Germany, but they're an EU and US-based manufacturer. They have received LIFT funding, the amount of $500,000 from the state of North Dakota as well, and have a tremendous market opportunity in Grand Forks. The recommendation last received by the similar body was to approve that loan pending a background check and some further due diligence. I want to report on that a little bit. There was some question about whether the state of North Dakota would be willing to share due diligence on applicants' projects that had gone through the LIFT committee. Had a conversation with the Bank of North Dakota president and other staff, and they're willing to do that. They're going to be taking a more active role in in a LIFT program due diligence and program management. They did not do due diligence on this one, so I can't bring that to the table, but just moving forward, we'll have that cooperation as long as the companies permit, and we'll ask them to permit that collaboration with Bank of North Dakota. We also talked about, and Todd, Mr. Phelan talked about, the timing of certain due diligence and conversations with EC and coming to this body and similar bodies, and maybe more of a celebratory function at first and then harder conversations later on. And what Mr. Phelan and I had really come up with is the fact that the EDC will now take on the due diligence, the background check responsibilities for applicants prior to reporting to our board and prior to bringing them here. We are going to be using Sterling, which is a company that the University of North Dakota uses, both domestically and internationally, for background checks for faculty members and other members of their staff. We're in the process of setting up that account with the holidays. We just haven't been able to do that yet, but we will do a background check that provides a number of different checks in terms of criminal background. Let me find my cheat sheet here, if I could, Mr. Chairman. Number of things to do: international criminal records check, Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is banking and property, and terrorist watch list, motor vehicle records, educational verifications, employment verifications if desired, and professional license verifications. So they do this on an international basis in 240 countries and territories. So we'll be able to provide a written background check for the principals of AL Robotics once we get that account established. We anticipate that would be this week. And so it would be my hope that this board could move that application forward, approval contingent on successful background check with Sterling through the EDC.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Lund. And at this point, there certainly has been no red flags, no concerns. As you've noted, there has already been LIF funding approved by the
Yep.
state of North Dakota. Very good, so ideally, conversation, comments, otherwise, we'd be looking for approval of this loan request contingent upon the successful completion of due diligence.
Correct.
Thank you. Been a little while since I've been in this role. Let me stop things there for a moment and open a public hearing on 2.1. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing, then looking either for comments, questions, or a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Mr. Mayor, it's
Yeah, motion to approve.
motion to approve. Flat out or approval with
Approval with the due diligence, yeah.
very good. And second for this motion? Looking for a second. Do I have a second for Mr. Kawami? Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.2, safety spec, accelerate loan security request. Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Pardon me while I juggle my massive notebook. You may recall safety spec was approved by this group for an accelerate loan last fall. That loan didn't close, however, and they came forward in May with a request to have a different form of security than is our standard package. Typically, we asked for a blanket UCC. Their request was to secure their loan with a patent rather than that blanket UCC. There was some also significant discussion through Growth Fund Committee. They also requested that their job hiring within Grand Forks be reduced from a goal of 75% to 50%. That is kind of a soft goal as written anyway, and as we all know, hiring is difficult, so that seemed to be a relatively easy ask on their part. Growth Fund Committee concurred. In terms of securing with a patent rather than the blanket UCC, the recommendation out of Growth Fund Committee was to concur with that, subject to some sort of third-party confirmation that there was sufficient value. Staff has received that through a transactions IP, a patent broker, and they did provide what looks to me to be an appraisal of this patent that does support value in excess of the $250,000 loan amount. We do have Mr. Barton and Mr. Carroll from Safety Spec joining us via Zoom if you have any questions, but the recommendation is to proceed with the change in security as requested.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. And thank you, Mr. Carroll and Mr. Barton, for joining us this evening. I'll take a moment to comment that the Accelerate Loan Program was meant to be a little more entrepreneurial. It has been successful in attracting tech companies to our community, but it has not been possible to create a one-size-fits-all. Each loan request has been unique in its own way. And so we're learning a great deal. Thanks for addressing the request of the Growth Fund Committee. With that, are there any questions or comments from the JDA committee members? From the JDA members? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion. As soon as I open and close open the public hearing, open the public hearing on item 2.2, safety spec accelerate loan security request. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Hearing none, I'll close that public hearing, and now I'm looking for a motion.
Do we lose the people online?
We just lost a bunch of folks online, but reconnecting there.
All right, I'll move approval.
Very good. Have a motion from the mayor.
I'll second.
Yes, have a second from Representative Lunsky. Any further questions or comments?
I think, do we have 4?
We don't quite have 4 yet. I'm hoping that comes back up here just in a moment. Not quite the same as a fire alarm, but here we go. We have a motion and a second on the floor. And looking, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item 2.3, Chino Latino, a startup loan request. Mr. Conlon.
Good evening, Chair Weber, members of the authority. This item before you is a $30,000 startup Grand Forks loan request. It's for Chino Latino, it's a restaurant startup expansion, sort of under Steers LLC. It's just been best described as a sort of a permanent food truck arrangement. The request is for $30,000, and this one's slightly unique in the sense that it did not go through the SBDC by the time it had gone to the Growth Fund Committee just a couple weeks ago. The Growth Fund at that time recommended approval of this request subject to Mr. Dean going to SBDC, having that standing meeting as per our program parameters, and getting some financial projections as they provide to show that this business does indeed cash flow. That meeting has since occurred. We understand it was positive for Mr. Dean as well as for us, and that those projections have been provided, which show that the business does in fact cash flow and meets the growth fund contingency that was laid out. So with that, I'm not sure if Mr. Dean is here. If you have any questions, I'd happily stand for them. Otherwise, request is before the authority.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Conlon. I'd like to open a public hearing on item 2.3, Chino Latino startup loan request. Does anyone wish to speak to this matter? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Looking for questions, comments, or a motion.
Move approval, Mr. Weber.
A motion for approval from President Sandy. And was that a second from Mr. Sowski? No.
Kavami.
Okay.
Kavami.
Second from Mr. Kavami. Very good. So we have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1, with Ms. Osowski opposing. Item 2.4, Snack Shack startup loan default.
Good evening. This item has been before this authority as well as the Growth Fund Committee at several junctures over the past year or so. Snack Shack currently holds a roughly $18,000 loan with the Growth Fund, as well as a approximately $9,000 loan with the North Dakota Development Fund. I guess the short of the situation is that, despite several attempts over the past several months and over a year to get things back up and running after the food trailer experienced some significant damage in an accident, Mr. Holt's not been able to find a workable path forward through insurance claim payments and other means to move the business forward, and is unable to repay the loan. He notified us with a letter at the beginning of last month that was the case, which I believe is attached to the staff report, kind of outlining in more detail the context of that. With that, we have followed up with Mr. Gosta as well as Mr. Holt, and there are no assets, liquid or otherwise, to pursue with this business. As you'll recall, this is one of the last under this program that was unsecured without a blanket UCC on business assets, so we are relatively unsecured on this one. With that in mind, Growth Fund Committee and staff is recommending at this time that we, rather than declare this loan as written off or writing off this loan, we declare it in default and don't pursue collections at this time. The loan would remain payable under Snack Shack LLC, so should he ever resume operations under that LLC, he would still owe the loan. But it's really just over the next several months, if doesn't have an ability to repay at this time, we just don't pursue collections at this time. So happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you for that summary, Mr. Conlon. Let me open the public hearing on item 2.4, Snack Shack startup loan default. Does anyone wish to speak to this item?
Mr. Weber.
Yes, please. Mr. Mayor.
Is Mr. Holt here tonight?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
I don't believe so.
that's all I got.
If no one else wishes to speak to this, I'll close the public hearing, looking for comments or a motion.
I'll move approval.
Have a motion from President Sandy to concur with the staff recommendation,
I'll second it.
and a second from Representative Veen. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. That completes our agenda. I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion from the mayor, motion from Ms. Lunsky. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thanks.
Welcome, everybody. We'll call to order the Grand Forks City Council meeting Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. Get a roll call, please, Maureen.
Weigel. Susky. Weber. Lunsky. Here. Kavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Veen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 1.2, Pledge of Allegiance. Item 1.3, just a couple announcements, a couple comments from last week. First of all, I want to welcome Ms. Osowski and Ms. Lunsky to the council, so welcome. We had the Space Development Agency ribbon cutting last week, which was great. We had our whole congressional delegation. Senator Kramer, Senator Hoeven, and Kelly Armstrong, Representative Armstrong was out. So that was great to see. We had a great meeting, a great dinner afterwards, but a lot of great things happened, so happy to see that. That's all I got from mayor's announcements, so we're moving on to 2, awards, presentations, appointments, and proclamations.
2.1 is a Fufang USA due diligence update.
Mr. Phelan, you got Mr. Gosted starting?
I think Mayor, we're going to go with Mr. Gossett first, and then I'll follow up with some of the engineering environmental items. So please, Mr. Gossett.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and council members, tonight we've got Bridget Reinking with us. She was engaged by the city of Grand Forks to assist in the review on the CFIUS matter. I just want to give a little bit of background on Ms. Reinking. She is special counsel with the Cooley Law Firm in Washington, D.C., where practices focus on CFIUS jurisdictional assessments and preparation of CFIUS filings and managing reviews and investigations by CFIUS jurisdictional transactions for clients. Before joining the Cooley Law Firm, I believe in November of 2021, Ms. Reinking was with the U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of General Counsel, where she served as senior counsel and lead counsel, where she was responsible for all jurisdictional assessments and other legal analysis on behalf of CFIUS. In this position, Ms. Reinking provided counsel to senior Treasury officers on more than 600 foreign investment matters reviewed by CFIUS. Her position, both with Cooley Law Firm and the U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of General Counsel, obviously provides her deep knowledge of CFIUS filings and enforcement proceedings. Ms. Reinking also serves as a U.S. Army Reserve officer and is Chief of Intelligence Law for her unit in the JAG, the Judge Advocate General with the U.S. Army. Ms. Reinking is also a guest lecturer for the National Defense University's College of Information and Cyberspace on U.S. national security law matters. And she received the Secretary Treasurer Annual Award for contributions to the CFIUS team, and also was a recipient of the Office of General Counsel Annual Award for Legal Team of the Year. What we did with Ms. Reinking is we requested her to provide us some assistance as to what the jurisdictional requirements are for CFIUS with respect to the Fufang transaction. She's provided some guidance to us, and I think I'd turn it over to Ms. Reinking to provide the council and the mayor an update as to where she's at with her work, and to provide information on the CFIUS review that we've engaged her to do.
Ms. Reinking, please.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for that introduction. Just to underscore a couple of points that Dan just made. So here, the city engaged COOL to advise on a couple of questions, specifically whether CFIUS would even have jurisdiction to review the acquisition of the real properties by Fufang, and then, separate and apart, whether the circumstances around those acquisitions would, warrant a filing with the committee. And I'll also dig into those points, obviously. But I do want to just say, as a threshold matter, the city at all times appreciated it wasn't a party right to those real estate transactions, but because it serves as Fufang's partner in the development of the proposed but core mineral processing plant, obviously the city has this strong interest in ensuring that the city and Fufang are appropriately and proactively addressing, concerns of the, U.S. national security community to the extent they exist. So implicating all of the sort of jurisdictional questions is, of course, this overarching analysis of whether there were national security considerations that should be at play. And appreciating that this audience here isn't necessarily involved in a whole lot of CFIUS jurisdictional transactions. I'll just briefly introduce CFIUS so we can orient as to sort of what exactly I was asked to review. So CFIUS has a specific mandate. It's an interagency committee, so it's not one singular governmental entity, but rather it's a coalition team, if you will, of all of the economic and defense-related U.S. executive agencies. So you could probably intuit who those might be: Defense Department, Treasury, Energy, Homeland Security, those types of U.S. Executive agencies. And so those member agencies of CFIUS review on a very strictly confidential basis transactions for the specific reason of investigating whether or not those transactions implicate U.S. national security concerns. And so, over the past, it's been in existence for several decades. Over the past few years, its jurisdiction has expanded such that we might have heard CFIUS becomes a little bit more of a household name than it was in sort of the 90s. But over the past 5 years alone, the committee has gradually exercised its authority to mitigate perceived national security issues with transactions, with a little more regularity, several hundred times. And on occasion, CFIUS has in fact recommended to the president to block or unwind transactions because of identified national security risks. And so that's the overarching reason why we would care if the committee is interested in the real estate acquisitions by Fufang. I think it's also probably relevant to understand that CFIUS is a fairly, I'll call it a cooperative type regulatory process, in the sense that more often than not, committee members receive notice of a transaction that could present national security concerns after parties voluntarily make filings with the committee. I think this is a pretty important characteristic of the CFIUS review process to understand, because when parties voluntarily notify the committee of a transaction, they're allowing the committee, in a very transparent manner, the opportunity to review the transaction, potentially address national security concerns, and the benefit to the parties is really important, because at the end of that review process, the parties receive a formal, written confirmation from the committee, that either doesn't have jurisdiction to review the transaction, or that it has no unresolved national security concern. So obviously that's the motivation for many parties to sort of voluntarily go through the CFIUS notice process. So I'm not bearing the lead And before I sort of offer, color and analysis, I'll explain that we believe CFIUS would perceive national security risks with respect to these real estate transactions and would want to formally review them for reasons I can get into, but we also believe that it's likely that the committee would not have jurisdiction to do so. And so those are, two maybe countervailing points, and I'll explain kind of both. But to offer our recommendation up front, consistent with the city's, articulated interest to me of its desire for transparency and cooperation with broader U.S. national security community, we have recommended that the city encourage them to actually make a filing with the committee in order to secure its written confirmation that it does not have jurisdiction to review the transaction, because we believe that's ultimately what the outcome would be, that it finds that it has no jurisdiction to review them. But, to the extent that it takes a very broad view of its jurisdiction, which is a possibility, that notification would also allow the parties to work with CFIUS to address any of their security concerns, and sort of resolve them and kind of put the matter to bed, to the resolution of the government's satisfaction. Maybe I should pause there just to see if there are any questions before I give color on the jurisdictional assessment.
Great. Any questions at this time from the council members for Ms. Reinking? No, please continue.
Great, okay. So, I'll make this distinct just for purposes of this dialogue, but effectively CFIUS has sort of two buckets of jurisdiction, if you will. The first is with respect to real estate transactions, so naturally we think we would start here. Analysis of jurisdiction under the sort of real estate regulations, which are colloquially referred to as the Part 802 regulations, because that's just the way it appears in the Code of Federal Regulations. It appears in 31 CFR Part 802. The question here is basically pretty mechanical. If you have a map and you know the location of the real property acquired, and you understand where the DoD military installations are located, you can suss out very quickly, without a lot of whether the committee has jurisdiction over a real estate transaction under Part 802. There are really no subjective considerations. Suffice to say, it is just simply a function of where are the military installations that are sensitive and how far away are they from the acquired land. Again, simplifying this a little bit because of presentation, but here, as relevant, we're talking about two potentially implicated military installations. One is the Grand Forks Air Force Base, the other is the Cavalier Air Force Station. Both of them have sort of interesting things going on, but from a very practical perspective, under Part 802, the only relevant consideration is where are they located. And here, as I probably track and most appreciate, Grand Forks Air Force Base is approximately 12 miles away from the real properties acquired by Fufang. The Cavalier Air Force Station is, almost 70 miles away. And that is, under the CFIUS regulations, just not close enough. And so under this sort of Part 802 jurisdictional authority, we're not looking at a jurisdictional, hook, if you will, for CFIUS purposes. That doesn't totally resolve the question, right, because there's a second bucket. So under a separate set of regulations that sort of implement CFIUS's authorities, the Part 800 regulations, there's a different question that CFIUS asks. CFIUS asks the question, is there a foreign person that has gained control of the U.S. business? And so, I'm sure that most people are sort of thinking to themselves, Fufang got a couple of tracts of land. How is that a U.S. business? And so naturally, you might even wonder why we would think about Part 800 in connection with a real estate property acquisition. CFIUS, to respond to that, CFIUS is a very broad view of the term U.S. business. Basically, CFIUS considers whether a set of acquired assets could constitute any kind of U.S. business, including like an early stage agribusiness or like an early stage farm. And so what we sort of had to do is we worked with Fufang, which is very cooperative, and collected information about the kind of assets that might have been acquired in connection with the land property. You might think to yourself, for example, that a jurisdictional transaction could be implicated by the acquisition of the land property, plus farming equipment, plus records of how the property has been farmed in the past, plus employees potentially, plus people with farming know-how. You take all those assets together, maybe you're looking at an early stage farming business, and that could be a U.S. business for CFIUS purposes. On balance, though, that wasn't the fact pattern here. The fact pattern here is that land was acquired. There was no super special assets. One of the land tracts didn't even involve prior, farming precedent. It was just laid down property for construction storage, and none of the assets that laid on the property were implicated by the transaction. So we're talking about the acquisition of land. Because of that, on balance, our view is that, once again, the committee wouldn't exercise jurisdiction under Part 800 to review the transaction because it wouldn't view the land properties, either individually or collectively, to be a U.S. business. But I put a little asterisk here because, once again, I want everyone to appreciate there is a subjective component to that assessment. Someone could take a very aggressive view of the land acquired and say, no, that's enough to be an early stage U.S. farming business. So with that sort of jurisdictional landscape being explained, the other portion of the work here related to whether there was any kind of risk that the committee might, sort of attach to in looking at a transaction like this. And that's important because there could be something like 40,000 jurisdictional transactions every year that occur. CFIUS, of course, does not review all of them. They don't even review close to 1% of them. They review transactions that actually implicate U.S. national security. And so a major part of the work that we did was to assess whether there could actually be national security concerns implicated by the land property acquisition. And we think ultimately there could be. And to put a fine point on it, after we did our fact diligence and landed at an answer, CFIUS itself confirmed it for us because they perform outreach to the city. It's called non-notified outreach. Effectively, the committee has team members that sort of scour, let's say, public-facing news sources and other sort of public-facing information to identify potential transactions of interest. And so if they seize upon a transaction of interest that the parties haven't yet voluntarily notified to them, they do from time to time perform outreach, start asking questions about it, performing sort of a unilateral review. So what happened with the city? We've got questions in connection with these transactions. Excuse me, just a moment. So in any event, after we got that outreach, that sort of confirmed the recommendation, you should make encourage people to make a filing. And our understanding is that FoodHub has been very cooperative, and they do intend to make a filing, which is something maybe Dan also wants to speak to, but in sort of short summary of why we think that CFIUS is not likely to be able to assert jurisdiction, we'd like the parties to receive formal confirmation of the committee's lack of jurisdiction. So we're requesting, encouraging the city to encourage performing term to make a filing and get that, secured and ready. So I'll turn it back to you.
And Ms. Reinking, as I understand, Fufang is prepared to move forward with this jurisdictional question filing. Is that accurate? Is that your understanding?
Yes, I've received confirmation from their counsel.
And that filing will evaluate whether CFIUS has jurisdiction to review this matter or not. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes, at the end of the review, so there will be a review that will commence after the filing is made, and the end of the review will either provide a formal written statement that the committee lacks jurisdiction to review a transaction, or the review will include an analysis of national security considerations because they determine in connection with the review that they in fact have jurisdiction, And so instead, the end of the review would sort of close with a letter confirming no unresolved national security consideration. So you get an answer either way.
And that answer comes within a 30 to 60-day period, somewhere in that neighborhood?
They are intending to submit what is called a short form filing on a declaration to the committee, and once the filing is accepted, the committee reviews it on a 30-day calendar period timeframe.
Thank you. We're going to open up. You okay to take any questions if council members have any questions? And I guess the question I would have, so that they're going to send this short form voluntary submission, you're going to get an answer in 30 days. Will that answer come to the company, come to the city? What's the process of informing what the result of their diligence is?
It's a good question. It would go to the parties. So the parties here being, because it's a sort of a closed transaction, the former owners of the land wouldn't necessarily even be indicated within the sort of the filing itself. They probably would not even participate in the filing. I expect that it would only be Food Fund. And my expectation is that Food Fund would receive that letter, and they have been quite cooperative and been partnering with the city. Obviously, I expect that they would share the result, that due to CFIUS's confidentiality restrictions, CFIUS would not share that letter with anyone except for the parties to the filing, so you would have to rely on Food Fund to get the information.
Okay, and then if there's further work that's being done by CFIUS, would we get, I guess there's two results, right? They're going to either go further, or they're going to say we don't have jurisdiction over this and move on. If they do, if they're going to go further in a deeper dive, I guess, are we going to get, how would you know? I mean, how would that trigger, other than just would they get a letter? I mean, that same letter, essentially, that's how you know that would be triggered, or what would be, how would we get informed on that front? Are we still just working with the company, or is that something they would inform you of?
So let's assume, for purposes of the question, that the committee decides to exert jurisdiction over the transaction under party hundreds. If the committee decides to exert jurisdiction, it would assess the national security risks, and I expect that at the conclusion of the 30-day assessment, they might request a follow-on filing from Food Fund to allow them to further elaborate on those risks. 30 days is a fairly short period of time, obviously, and sometimes not sufficient enough to completely get into all of the national security risks that might arise from the transaction. And so one of the options at the end of the 30-day assessment, at the end of this sort of assessment of a short form filing, is actually a request from the committee for the parties to submit a long form filing called a notice. This doesn't happen very often, but again, if they don't believe they have satisfactorily resolved all of their concerns or considerations, they might ask the parties just sort of give them more time, if you will, and submit a longer notice, giving them a 45-day ramp-up period and basically more time to review. If that happens, then once again, the only person who would know that besides CFIUS would be Food Fund. And this is, one of the hallmarks of the CFIUS apparatus. Parties who submit filings to the committee are assured of full confidentiality in doing so. It can't be FOIA'd. No one outside of the parties themselves is going to divulge the fact that CFIUS is looking at a transaction. For example, if a news outlet contacts CFIUS and asks them to comment or confirm that they've received a filing in connection with a transaction, CFIUS is not going to respond to that, or they're going to say we can't respond to that because they can't under Section 721, which is their underlying statute. So there's not going to be anyone who knows anything except for Food Fund, and it's going to be Food Fund who will tell you how the review is going.
All right, I know you had mentioned at the beginning, but CFIUS, it's Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. That's essentially, that's what they do all day, every day, this committee. And they've got access to the Department of Defense, any federal, anything that they need access to, they're able to get access to as far as anything in the federal, government, any committees, any branches, any place that they need to reach, they've got access to that. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, the committee can and does leverage the entire U.S. national security intelligence apparatus to conduct its work.
So that would be about the best place we could go to have this reviewed.
It would be probably the best and maybe even the only place to go. There are no equivalent regulatory regimes. The Director of National Intelligence directly informs the work of the committee, and the Director of National Intelligence draws upon all of the intelligence components to conduct the work of the threat assessment.
And at this point, if they're making the voluntary submission, let's say in the next 10 days, we'd probably expect to get some answer back or to the company some point in August. Would that be fair? Within the next 60 days?
Yes. To the point, if our assessment is correct, that they do not believe, if they find that they don't have jurisdiction to review the transactions, you would know on day 30. So they would submit the filing, it would be accepted, presumably within 5 to 10 days. And then that date of acceptance would be day 1. On day 30, you will get the written letter, if we're right, confirming no jurisdiction.
All right, I'll open this up. Any other council members have any questions for Ms. Reinking? Mr. Kamani?
So just a question on, let's say you're wrong, and just hypothetically say that they find something and need to request a long form submittal, right? Could you just tell us what the timeline is, assuming every decision is the worst case scenario for Fufang, just to be aware of what that looks like and what that process would look like?
Certainly. So if we can assume worst case scenario, the committee would assert jurisdiction over the transaction, presumably under Part 800, by finding that the land tracts constitute an early stage U.S. business performing operations. Let's assume that's the fact pattern. They would either be able to conduct their evaluation of national security and jurisdiction in 30 days, or at the end of 30 days they wouldn't be able to, and so they would request a notice. And so a notice is a longer form of a filing than the declaration. The declaration is the short form submission. That's the technical name for it. So the parties, specifically Fufang, would have to draft and submit that longer form. So it would probably take some time to draft that. Let's assume they could do it in 2 weeks, building from the information they've already collected, and submit that to the committee. The practice in connection with a long form review is that the notice is submitted as a draft notice first, and the committee puts comments, basically gives comments back to the party, expects the parties to incorporate those comments into a formal filing, and then the parties submit a formal filing. That process can take about a month to draft, submit, and then receive comments, and then submit a formal notice. And so you're maybe tacking an extra 30 days onto day 30 of the end of the assessment period that came from the short form filing. So we're looking at 60 days out now that they've submitted that formal notice. And that formal notice is reviewed on a 45-day review period timeline, which if CFIUS cannot resolve or sort of like do all of its work within 45 days, they can kick it out to an investigation period of an additional 45 days. So again, tracking this worst case scenario period of horribles, you're looking at an additional potential 90 to 120 days until we get to what the committee will ultimately do. And again, drawing this to like its worst possible conclusion, the committee would identify national security risks and then also conclude that they are non-mitigable. So what the committee likes to do, if it finds national security risks, is mitigate them. They work with parties, enter into what's called a mitigation agreement, and the transaction parties, put up some, structural, physical, logical, other kinds of mitigation in place to actually address U.S. national security concerns. That's the benefit from the intelligence community's perspective of the CFIUS review process. It's not just that the committee identifies concerns, but it resolves them to the committee and intelligence community's satisfaction. And so if they can't resolve them for whatever reason, the, drop dead terrible is they refer the transaction to the president to block or unwind it, or they basically tell the parties they're about to do that, and the parties, walk away from the transaction and basically voluntarily walk away and divest their interest, making the transaction disappear. That's the parade of horribles.
In that case, then, would the landowners have to take their property back, or how would that, I guess, just plan itself?
No, in that case,
Liquidation.
Fufang would have to sell it to someone else at the committee's approval. So it's not that Fufang would have to sell it back to the initial owners, someone else would have to acquire it.
Okay. Any other questions from council? I guess I just had one other one. You mentioned something about 40,000 transactions. That's roughly the number of transactions, foreign investment type, and just a guess?
That's a budget ranking guess, just based on, I didn't talk about all of the types of transactions the committee has jurisdiction over because many of them are not implicated by these real estate purchases. But the committee has broad authority to look at many different types of transactions, including control transactions and non-controlling, non-passive transactions involving U.S. businesses, in addition to certain types of real property acquisitions and leases and concessions. And so the point that I was trying to make is that there are any number of transactions that happen on any given day, any given year, that the committee could exert jurisdiction over, but the committee only focuses on transactions that actually implicate authentic national security concerns, and so it only reviews a very small fraction of the transactions over which it could exert jurisdiction.
All right, thank you. Any further comments or questions from Ms. Reinking? Well, thank you for your time and your work on this, and we'll await your final memo on the topic. So, thank you.
Certainly, of course.
Mr. Phelan.
Mayor Buchenski and members of City Council, I'm going to follow up on some of the environmental engineering. Sorry, Mr. Goss, do you have some other legal updates before I jump in?
I do. I just want to make sure that we get to those. Just so the council's aware, the $5 million letter of credit, we did get an email on June 24th. Of the letter of credit, and I understand that the original has now been received also by the Finance Department, so that the letter of credit is outstanding. We're working on a modification of the development agreement to account for that $5 million letter of credit and tapping into it if the bank would happen not to renew it. One possibility is that if they don't renew the letter of credit and Fufang doesn't seek out an identical letter of credit, we would then be able to tap into the current one. Fufang has also proposed that they may not even get another letter of credit and rather just deposit the $5 million into an escrow account rather than getting a letter of credit. So that was a favorable response. I need to draft that document as well. A couple of updates. As the council is aware, the city is involved in some lawsuits involving the petition. There were actually two lawsuits that were commenced. One was an appeal of a local governing body decision. The second was identical facts, and the law is the same. The petitioners brought, and it was the same petitioners brought a case for what's called a writ of mandamus, or an injunctive relief. And a writ of mandamus is where the court mandates that a political subdivision do certain things. In this case, would, if they were successful, to mandate that an election be held. Currently, with respect to the appeal, our legal counsel have filed a motion to dismiss. And also with the mandamus action and the injunctive relief action, they filed the motion for summary judgment, requesting that claim be dismissed as well, and to deny the mandamus request. Judge Donovan Foudy out of Devil's Lake has been appointed to serve, to preside over both of these cases that are pending. With respect to both the motion to dismiss and the summary judgment motion, the petitioners have until July 21st to file an answer brief. Then the city has an opportunity to file a reply brief, and then it would be fully briefed, and the judge would be able to have oral argument on those matters. There's currently attempted to be scheduled a status conference with the court to kind of set the schedule for these two cases. In addition, last week, we were served with a complaint by Dennis Cadillac that brought an action against the city. This is relative to the annexation that occurred. And the issues are that he's raised in that complaint are the same that he raised during the annexation hearing. Judge Don Hager is currently assigned to that case. And I understand that our response will be submitted. He's brought a motion for a temporary restraining order, and as I understand, we will be submitting a response this week. The law firm, Scott Porsberg and Brian Schmidt, who are representing us, the city, in the other two cases, have been appointed through the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund to also defend the city with respect to this annexation action. So those are the updates with respect to the legal side of things.
Any questions regarding that? All right, Mr. Gassett, or Mr. Phelan, please continue.
Okay, I did, I'll just go through some of the bullets. You know, your city team has been working, both staff and consultants have been working on the various due diligence items related to the environmental and engineering portions of it. The first bullet relates to the wastewater treatment plant, and we're moving forward with a process called the construction manager at risk. We have advertised, we did receive one proposal. And I think the one proposal is a good proposal from PKG Contracting. They're out of the Fargo area. They primarily do wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants. So I think we have a good construction manager at risk. We're still going to go through the process of interviews and various vettings of this particular firm. If everything moves forward according to plan, we would be back to the City Council and the Committee of the Whole on July 25th. And in the August 1st City Council meeting to ask you to move forward with PKG. But again, we're going to go through our various due diligence items to make sure that PKG has the wherewithal to do that. They are the one firm, but they're a very good firm, and I think it shows just the tightness in our area for contractors, and so we'll continue to move forward with that. The other thing I want to highlight, we moved forward with the construction manager at risk because we were concerned about getting enough bidders for the wastewater treatment plant, and I think this is a way that we can really break down the various bidding packages, similar to what we did with the water treatment plant as we move forward. When we first hire the construction manager, we're going to ask them as part of work with the City of Grand Forks as part of the pre-construction so that we can really finalize what the total cost of the wastewater treatment plant improvements are going to be made. And again, to our new city council members, the improvements we're looking at with the wastewater treatment plant are primarily matters that we're going to do irrespective of Fufang, but with Fufang looking to move forward, it has compressed some of the time frames that we're working on. It's making some of these improvements. So instead of going over a 6-year period of time, we're looking at more of a 3-year period of time. So moving forward, the CMAR process is a better way for us to try to get to an end. The other things that have come up along the way is we are working on various task orders, and so we plan to give some updates at July 18th regarding some of the wastewater pretreatment, and there was a lot of discussion as it went through planning and zoning regarding what their pretreatment was going to look like before it enters the city system, regarding whether they were going to be open, whether there were going to be odors, all those various things. We're going to have an update on July 18th on that particular matter as we've worked with them. Number 2 is thermal plumes, and there's going to be one main thermal plume on the site, and so we're going to have some modeling done regarding how that's going to disperse on the site to mainly make sure that there's no concerns regarding our airport facility. So you'll have some updates regarding that. And then finally, traffic and odor. We have a finalized traffic study that we've been working on with the North Dakota DOT that will specify all the various improvements that we need to make as part of this facility moving forward. So we'll move forward with that. That's going to be an important part for you guys to approve so that we can then follow up with the North Dakota DOT to ask for various funding mechanisms on whether it's 81 or Highway 2 all along the way. And I also mentioned odor, so we'll have some updates on odor too, and that I know has come up over and over again too, so there'll be updates on that. The third bullet is, I think it's important to note, we're making infrastructure improvements not only for the Fufang investment, but we're also making infrastructure improvements for the Highway 81 area. And so when we annexed the larger area, we said we were going to move forward with infrastructure improvements for all up and down I-81 to include Fufang. So when you look at that third bullet, some of the construction that we're looking to move forward with are the stormwater pond, the sanitary sewer, the lift station, and then the various raw water things. So all of those improvements that are moving forward with are really meant to serve the entire annexation area. And so you'll see at the July 25th and August 1st meeting, some of the first special assessments we're going to set up and some of the first task orders that we're going to ask you to move forward with. One of the reasons why the city is paying for example, the potable water, we're paying for the sanitary sewer. However, we're still going to set up special assessment districts because we're going to assess Fufang. And what we want to do as part of the development agreement is to ensure, even though the Highway 81 adjacent private area is not being assessed because the city's paying 100% of the cost share, we do have a backstop in being able to assess Fufang in their property. So we will be setting up special assessment districts for that so that we can apply their infrastructure portions to their property longer term. The fourth bullet, again, goes through all the various utilities. There's going to be a lot of utilities along 27th Avenue North from wastewater, water, and stormwater. And so a lot of those assessments are going to be coming through in that August 22nd and September 6th meetings. And then we are going to look at 2 pump stations. One will serve the domestic area along 81, and there will be an industrial sanitary lift station that will serve the industry in the area. And when I talk about the industry, it'll be Fufang, Red River Biorefinery, and J.R. Simplot. So we're proposing that we would separate the domestic wastewater, which will be generally that Highway 81 area, from the 3 major industries that I just mentioned, that they'll have a separate and distinct wastewater pump station. The second to last bullet is we've had a lot of discussion about water supply, so I've attached 2 documents. One is a shorter presentation regarding looking at where our water supply. We just, by chance, Mr. Steve Beering is here from Beering Associates. He's on here because he's part of the Memorial Village development project, but as attached, there's a PowerPoint presentation that looks at what our water supply looks like and really the outcome of that. And we'll provide more and more briefings because we're, other than the Fargo metro area, we're kind of the second metro area that really is driving the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, which is a supplemental water supply. And it's really targeted at the 1930s era drought and how would the Fargo Moorhead Metro do and how would the Grand Forks Metro area do, handle that. And really the conclusions, and Mr. Bruin's here to answer any more detailed question, is Grand Forks, we are going to have some water shortages in a 1930s era drought, if we were to extrapolate that to today, and it would be in years 4 and 5 of the 1930s. And as we grow and develop more industry, it's going to incrementally exacerbate that issue. Number 2, the other era that we look at is in the 1980s drought, and in both scenarios, with and without increased industry, Grand Forks should not have any issues with water supply in this area. So I think, again, it highlights the fact that why we're part of the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. In the middle of a 1930s era drought in Grand Forks in the Red River Valley, we are going to need this water supply project, and that's why we've been part of the project over the years. That's important to know. I've also attached a forum article that was also published in the Grand Forks Herald, and it talks about the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, and really is pushing to this next legislative session that we really need to come up with a long-term funding plan for the project with the state participation, and it talks about the Fufang project, and it talks about industry in our Red River Valley. I think importantly, it stresses the need for the project. It stresses the need, projects are not coming to the Red River Valley, for example, in Wabaton, whereas projects are coming to Grand Forks. Why are they coming to Grand Forks? Because as we've talked about, we have more water supply in Grand Forks versus Wapaton, and we also have a better ability, because we have more water supply going through Grand Forks, we are able to discharge to our river system. So it really highlights that. The final piece on water supply, we are updating, working with Mr. Burien and others, so we are updating our drought mitigation plan. And so we do have a drought mitigation plan that prioritizes water use from human consumption to industrial consumption. We are, as part of the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, updating that plan also. And so you'll see that coming through this summer. And then finally, you will, in advance of the legislative session, we will be in front of you as a project participation agreement that will kind of really specify how much we're going to request as part of the project from a water supply project perspective, and it will also specify what our cost share will be as part of that project as we move forward. So a lot going on as part of the due diligence items. If you have any specific questions, I'd certainly take any questions. And again, on the water supply part, Mr. Burien is here as part of it. And I hope all the various infrastructure, we had a lot of discussion with Mr. Vien last week regarding the geotech that's in the action items. All of these items that I just talked about that are going to come forward in July and August, those, we're doing geotech in advance of trying to finalize some of the details of these projects, whether it's water, sewer, pump stations, the wastewater treatment plant. Those are all geotech borings we're going to do as part of that infrastructure that we're looking to move forward with as part of design here in July, August, and into the fall. Mayor, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, Mr. Vien, do you have a question, sir?
Yes, a couple of items. Thank you, Mayor. It was great to see this report come through on the sensitivity analysis. It actually goes into a little more depth than the water supply, Grand Forks water supply study that was looked at about a month or two ago. And so it's giving us better data than we've ever had before, which is super critical as we do look at the water. And I agree, the study clearly identifies the need for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, which we've been pursuing for some time. So it's great to see that that's been confirmed. Earlier reports that we had plenty of water really is not, this here really puts more information, data toward the real issues we have, which is we will have shortages in the 30-style drought, even in using some of our drought contingency planning. So that's a really valid point that I think coming forward. I do think the thing that probably impacts us the most was one of the items that Todd just mentioned, and that's the project participation agreement. That agreement is going to be super critical for us. The one thing that I would like to spend a little more time on this sensitivity analysis is on the bypass flows that come from Fargo. That really becomes one of the most significant flows that's going to assure that we have a water supply. If it's less than what's indicated in the sensitivity analysis, the problem is greater. If it were to be more, then it would probably not be as significant. But it is a key point to how much water really will be coming from Fargo, which will be of significant importance. I'm going to spend a little more time with Todd and Steve looking through this, and would hopefully come back and have a further discussion of that in time. I don't think we need to do that at this council meeting. So just kind of giving you a heads up, there's a couple of items that are yet to be resolved. Also, I had, as you are aware, back in November of 21, some issues that I had brought forth on due diligence, and I'm going to do more of a review again with internally with that. And any questions, I think, just be brought back here for the whole council to be aware of, and just things to come. So I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vien. Any further comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Field and Mr. Gosted, and I don't think Ms. Ranniking's on anymore. All right, we'll move on to 3 public hearings, second reading of ordinances.
3.1 is public hearing and approval of Memorial Village development payment in lieu of property tax development agreement with the applicable attachments A through D.
Mr. Field, I know this one was from quite some time ago. One second, Mr. Kavami, and I think we finally gotten the UND to sign off. Is that basically where we're at with this one, so it's finally going through? This is
You are, yeah, Mayor Buczynski, you are correct. The city council and also the public schools and county had to sign off on this. This is a tax exemption for 20 years at a 90% exemption. And so this is one of four where the city council and those other taxing entities did approve this during the pandemic. UND has agreed to move forward now, working with the developer. Mr. Burian's here on behalf of the developer. They've also are working with the UND Alumni Association, also as a component part of this particular project. I think we're thankful right now with the higher interest rates and the inflationary construction that this project is continuing to move forward. Mr. Burian did remind me today once again that in the staff report when we did this a year or so ago, I mentioned it's a $31.5 million project. Now it's upwards of $40 million. So you can see what has happened most recently. So he wants you to know that they're going to move forward. I suspect that's cost UND some money on their lease and some others, but I think I'm happy that we're moving forward with this important project. It is our first, I'll call it mixed-use public-private partnership with UND. This is going to return this property to taxable value as opposed to being in public on campus, so I think it's unique. I think this is one of hopefully few, if not several, projects that are going to move forward in and around the campus area where UND is going to look to mixed-use properties that will return some of the properties to taxable value, probably with a UND component part similar to this, but a little bit different. So this is one of, I think, more that are coming. And with that, I turn it back to Mr. Gossett, who drafted the development.
Yeah, one second. Mr. Kavami, did you have something?
Yeah, just one item I wanted to add for council. While I have no relationship with the ownership of this development, I do have ownership in the architectural firm that is handling this project. So I just want that to be known that no direct relationship with the ownership, but if the council would choose, I'm happy to sit out from the vote.
All right, thank you. Does the council want to make a motion on that matter?
Mayor, I believe that Mr. Kavami, in his best interest, shouldn't vote on this matter. So I will make the motion that we should allow him to vote, even though I intend to vote against it.
Okay, we have a motion to allow Mr. Kavami. We have a second. We got a motion from President Sandy, second from Ms. Lunsky. For any further comment on that? Seeing none, all those, so again here, now you're going to vote in the negative if you want to keep him from voting on this. So it's a procedural thing, but it's how we manage it. So vote no, then he won't be able to vote. Okay. Yeah. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. All right, you're not allowed to vote, Mr. Kavami.
All right, because we have two new council members, I thought I'd go through a pilot. I know the other council members have gone through these before. Mr. Phelan talked about it as an exemption. It's not. It's a payment in lieu of taxes. It's something different than an exemption. And what we do is we use a calculation, it's in the development agreement, where we use actual levels of assessment and taxation on an annual basis. And I'll talk about that in a bit when we get into the development agreement. Each November 1, the city will certify to the county auditor as to the amount that has to be paid for this particular property in lieu of the property taxes. That amount of money then gets distributed based upon the same percentages that other taxes, property taxes, come in with respect to the other governmental bodies, the school district and the county. It only applies to buildings. It does not apply to land. It can go up to a 20-year period of time, and the particular pilot in this case is for the maximum 20-year period of time. We negotiate with the developer and memorialize it in the development agreement that we'll go through in a bit. We use, part of the process is we're to have a member of the school board part of this deliberation and negotiation. And so the city has a local government government advisory committee that consists of school board members, county members, park board members, and city council members to review this, and they did review this several years ago, and made a non-binding recommendation to go forward with the transaction. As Mr. Phelan said, because the payment in lieu lasts more than 5 years, we do have to send out a notice to the county and the school district to get their approval. Their non-response is effectively an approval. They have 30 days to respond. In this instance, we did send a letter out back in December of 2020, and both the county and the school district did approve the pilot in January of 2021. Part of the process is we're also to consult with the North Dakota Department of Commerce with respect to a payment in lieu. That was accomplished on March 2nd of 2022. Ryan Brooks advised me that he, Mr. Phelan and Meredith Richards had a communication with James Lyman with the Department of Commerce regarding this particular project and others. Because there are competitors with mixed-use facilities, the process also requires that that a notice to competitors be published twice. That occurred on June 11th and June 18th of this year. There are certain provisions as well under the payment in lieu where certain events can cause the payment in lieu to be terminated, one of which is that the information provided by the developer is proven to be inaccurate or untrue, if the use of the property doesn't comply with the reasonable expectations of the city, if the property is improved to an amount substantially greater than what the city anticipated, and that seems counterintuitive, but that's because the amount of the payment in lieu, we don't want a very large valued property and the payment in lieu amount be very low, something we didn't anticipate. Or if there's a change in the ownership, could cause the payment in lieu transaction to expire. The development agreement was part of the package. A couple of items I want to point out that we still need to insert. One of which is the effective date, and this is going to be, you can find that within the definitional section. It's at section 1.16. Assuming this gets approved, that would be July 5th of 2022. We also need to get a depiction, although we probably have one, I just haven't attached a depiction of the particular project itself. That becomes part of the development agreement, so that when somebody looks at this 10 years from now, they kind of know what was expected. There is a targeted property value is also to be inserted. The application noted a $30 million value. You got to keep in mind value is different than cost for construction. Your cost may be, or more likely going to be higher than what the actual value is for property tax purposes. So I would expect to put in maybe a $25 to $30 million targeted value on that. As far as the agreement is concerned itself, Section 2 sets out various standards that are required for this development. These are the same type of standards you've seen in other pilot agreements. For example, they have to meet all federal and state engineering, construction standards, things like that. One of the items I want to point out is that Section 2.2.3, if there's a material change in the development after it's been approved, the developer has to come back to the city to get approval for that type of material change. Again, so that we know the amount of the pilot and we don't have a large value property or very small value property that was not expected. Section 3 sets out how we do the calculation as to what the amount of the payment in lieu. It's not a set amount. It'll change on an annual basis based upon the value of the property on an annual basis. The key terms for this calculation, and these are defined terms, it's the incremental property value. That's the true and full value for property tax purposes as if the pilot didn't exist. The original property value is the true and full value of the property as it exists today, and there is no building, so that's going to be zero. And then the other key term is the term assessment date. That's February 1st of every year. That's the date that the city assessor goes through and evaluates property as of February 1st. And so what we do is we calculate the difference between that incremental value on an annual basis. And we've got an example. I put examples in my agreement so that you can run the math. So somebody looking at this 15 years from now can kind of figure out how to do the math calculation. So you take a look at the incremental value, which is the value after the property is completed. So assuming it's at $25 million, you deduct 0, which is the original value because there's no building there, and you take that 25 million times 90%, and that then becomes the deduction. So you take 25 million minus the 22.5 million, and you get a true and full value for the pilot calculation purposes of $2.5 million. And then you apply that valuation, you go through the process of determining what the property tax is based upon the then current mill rate on each year. So if the property continues to increase in value over time, the amount of taxes, the payment in lieu goes up as well. And also the value of the land will always get assessed and subject to property taxation. The one oddity here is that University of North Dakota or the state of North Dakota is contemplating or has an option to buy the first floor where the athletic department is going to be at. And if that happens, then that first floor would become exempt by state law. And so that would mean an adjustment going forward. The balance of the building would still remain taxable, just that first floor becomes tax exempt for property taxes because it's owned by the state. The remaining floors would continue to be taxable, and we'd continue to run the pilot calculation like we normally would, just accounting for all the floors except for that first floor. The section 3.2.5 mirrors the early termination provisions that are set out by statute. This pilot doesn't happen today if you approve it. There are conditions that have to be satisfied. The primary ones are that the property actually is completed, this development is completed, and that the developer, there's been no default up to that point. And so during this interim period of time, the property, the buildings will continue to be subject to property taxation. This becomes effective once the property becomes finally completed, which would be, I believe it's the end of 2023 into 2024. So that's when the payment in lieu would kick in. Up to that point, the property, the buildings, whatever exists during construction would continue to be subject to property taxation. There are representations and covenants from the developer that's found in Section 4 that are relied upon. Section 5 includes default provisions and remedy provisions. For example, if the developer doesn't perform under the terms of the agreement, one of the remedies is we can terminate the pilot at that point going forward. Another aspect, and this is found in all our pilot agreements, is that except for this pilot and the potential for the state owning the first floor, there are no other tax advantages that could be garnered for this particular property. This is it for the next 20 years. So tonight, what you'd be asking to do, there is a resolution that was prepared. This resolution sets out various findings. The description of the property, section 1.2 just talks about what the development is going to be, and then certain findings, for example, that this development complies or is consistent with the general plan for the city, including the 2050 land use plan. Section 1.4, there's some findings with respect to the reasons for it, and these are coming out of previous staff reports from the city. Section 1.5 is a finding that it meets and is aligned with the public purpose benefits of granting the pilot, and again, these are coming from previous findings and recommendations from city staff. This particular item was reviewed by Baker Tilly, and they recommended a pilot consistent with what the development agreement calls for. It also describes that we went through the process with respect to the school district and the county and receiving their approval, discussion of contacting the Department of Commerce on this particular matter, that we've provided notice to competitors, In section 1.11 and 1.12 of the resolution, you do by statute need to make a determination as to whether this is in the best interests of the city. And so that finding is in there. At the end of the day, this resolution would approve the development agreement as proposed and also the payment in lieu of taxes that would spring from this development agreement. So a lot of information in a very short period of time. The other council members have been through this in 3 other development agreements similar, but I thought it was important for the 2 new council members to at least have some of this information, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question. So does the city have any policies or guidelines on the pilot program that people can view online or?
We do. There is a policy document, I think it's called tax increment financing policy, and a lot of those policies are utilized for the pilot program. It uses the word tax increment financing, but it's another property tax incentive that is utilized, so the city has been using that policy manual to assist in these things. And one of the very first things under the terms of the policy is that we send it to this local government action committee as well for their review. So it's not just the city council, it's park district, it's school district and the county, because they're impacted by these as well.
Okay, so there's nothing though that just has like specific, like I saw nothing online that stated, had any guidelines or anything about the pilot program. So I'm just kind of wondering, you know, where I can find that information, and if I'm missing something. I saw nothing that said pilot.
You're not, and it's the term of art. Tax increment financing is a little different vehicle, but it's all a property tax incentive, so there is some information there. Also by statute, the payment in lieu of tax is under 4057.103, and it's actually under subsections 2 and 3, I believe, is where the information can be found, but again, reliance upon that state statute as well.
Thank you. I think the unique thing about this is the project, or the property pays zero. I mean, it pays zero in tax right now as a state-owned deal, and we're essentially delivering service for free, and now we'll be bringing it into the tax rolls, which is unique from some of the other ones that may pay something now, but they're paying nothing. So when is that period going to start, where they would start, is that property going to become privately owned as signing of this, or is it going to be once completion? Because you said there's a tax period where they pay it the full amount in the meantime. When does it become no longer state-owned?
I don't know I don't know if it's closed where the property has been transferred yet or not, but the moment that dirt becomes transferred to this LLC, that land becomes subject to property taxation. That building, while it's being constructed, will continue to be subjected to property taxation. It may not, obviously it's not going to be at the full $25 million or $30 million value as construction proceeds, but until that property and that building is completed, it will be subject to property tax, and once it's completed, then this payment in lieu mechanism is triggered. So at a minimum, at least 10% of the true and full value will always be subjected to property tax. And as I said, as the value increases over time, assuming it does, then more of it becomes taxable. That 10% becomes larger, and so does the mill rate. And I don't know what the mill rate's going to look like in 5 or 10 years either, because we apply that as well.
All right, any further questions from Mr. Phelan or Mr. Gosted on item 3.1? All right, this time I'm going to open up the public hearing. So public hearing period is open. We did have a Bob Cowger, a resident. If you have any comments on here, please step up to the mic, sir.
Good evening. So I'm listening to the entire conversation, but essentially, they're going to pay 10% property tax, right? For the pilot program?
The way it works is that the property true and full value would be at 10% of the total value.
So they got 90% exemption. Correct?
If you want to look at it that way,
it's pretty easy. Okay, so my question is, you're going to give this development a 90% tax break, right, for 20 years? My question is, we have properties out there, what are you gonna do for us?
I would argue that this is helping lower that cost. You have a property that pays zero now, and in the future is going to be paying the full amount, but in the meantime, it's going to be paying upwards of, I don't know, 2.5 million times 1.5 is. Their services we're providing now, we're already providing those services, not getting paid anything for them.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get paid something that we're not getting
My
paid.
question is, how do we compete against something when our taxes continue to rise, okay? How do we compete against somebody that's paying 10%? They have 99 market rate units, okay? So not only do they have a great location, but they're not paying any property taxes. So if it was you in the seat and you owned them, would you have a problem with that? Anybody?
If I owned which, the property?
If you owned units in that area, would you think that was probably unfair competition?
Well, I can understand what you're saying, and this project will be vastly more expensive, and the tear down, all the project, the whole idea is that this is a brownfield one on campus, which makes it unique. Their costs are much higher. It's intended to offset the cost so the project can actually happen. But I can understand your argument is if you're building it and having to, but the whole point is it wouldn't get built otherwise.
Okay, that's not my argument. If they can't afford to pay the tax, should it be built? You're giving them an unfair advantage. They're going to collect market rate rent on market rate units, probably higher than what we collect blocks away, right? It only makes sense to me. I'm not a... what I'm saying is, it's unfair competition. Our properties continue to rise in taxes, and essentially, our rise in taxes are paying off that, however you look at it.
Well, this property, again, it doesn't pay anything. The cost of being able to build this is higher. This project would, and I get your argument, but their investment is going to line up. That's the whole reason that they do that. Their investment is much higher for the tear down and the construction. So their market rate is set with that price.
Yeah, I understand all
So their investment
that.
would be equal based on the expense. That's the whole reason that the third party looks at that.
I understand that. I've been listening to the entire conversation. I read everything about it, okay? But what I'm saying is, how is it fair to other property owners when we are paying a full boat taxes? That's what I want to explain, someone to explain to me. When you're giving them the rents, I know what the rents will be, okay? When you're giving them an unfair advantage by paying 10% of what we pay in property taxes, how do we compete? And this is not only an issue there.
Over that 20-year period, the amount that they're going to save on taxes is the same amount that they're going to have to pay extra that a project that you or nobody else would do to tear down an old stadium, to move sewer lines, everything that's the cost of it. So that's why there's a third party that looks at this. So it's not an unfair competition. So you're competing with them, but the cost and the savings that they're going to make, they're not getting because on the front end they have to spend it to get to ground zero.
They're not going to spend the money if they're not going to make the money. That argument doesn't work. I mean, I don't think that argument washes out.
That's the reason that there's a third party that looks at it. It's not us making that decision.
Okay, I'm just saying.
I understand what you're saying.
I know what the rents will be. They'll be higher than us, and for them not to pay taxes, it's unfair competition. Simply is. Right? I mean, they're a block from, well, they're right on campus, right? So it seems very unfair. Okay?
Okay.
And I totally disagree with this. I mean, if you can't afford to do it, then they shouldn't do it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Carlson, please, if anyone that wants to speak during this period can come forward.
I just wanted to understand, so the the current property, is that owned by UND, or is there a different owner for that property?
Yeah, it's owned by UND, so as a state entity, it doesn't pay any tax.
And the developer, is that UND, or is that a
It's a
different?
private, so it's a public-private partnership.
A private entity. So when you talk about that there was a third-party review, and that's usually going to add that but for if this incentive, that they would not be able to do that. So with that third-party review that's been done, that it's been proven that this company, and I've looked into this gentleman a little bit, would not be able to do this project without this tax incentive for this length of time for this particular percentage amount. Because I've been very, I've had my eye on pilot programs for quite some time, and now this one is probably going to put us over the $2 billion mark. And you mentioned with each one of these that it is the Grand Forks County as well as the Grand Forks schools that have to approve this in order for this to go through. But who's the biggest entities in this area that are begging for money? It's the Grand Forks County, which now they want to go to home rule charter in order to fix the jails and the roads and the culverts and whatnot, and also our schools that want the $55 million referendum. And does everything have to be a 20-year, tax abatement? And I absolutely agree with the gentleman that stepped up here. I think that the free giveaway of money, I understand that when you look at an incentive to bring businesses to the community, but I think it needs a closer look. I think it's gotten out of hand with, we have so many businesses out here that are not paying taxes to our community, and there's a lot of them. I have a list in my bag back there, and the cost is being dealt out to the citizens. Now we're being asked to pay more for the schools and more for the county. So I would certainly say no to this project.
Thank you. Any further comments during the public hearing? Dr. Barber, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just have a few brief points. I'm Elizabeth Barber. I live on the south side of Grand Forks. I have been renovating property on the north side of Grand Forks. I've discovered that it's historic, so I have the dubious honor of developing a close relationship with Owens Corning for filing roof warranties because of the hailstorms in North Dakota, as well as putting on a brand new roof on a historic house. So, point number one, to aid the due diligence, is that in my previous life, spent a lot of time in neurology and looking at blue zones, actually, for one of my aspects of my research. And there was a book put out by Dr. Day, cardiologist, about the blue zone in China, Bama County. It's called the Longevity Plan. And the people there lived there mainly because they were driven out of their homes everywhere else in China, and they now live in the hills because they had to run for their lives, and now they live on seeds and fruits and, very basic plant-based diet, which we're all told to eat now. But they got there because of basically abuses by the Chinese Communist government. So that's point number one. Point number two is when I was attending a neurology conference in Vancouver about 10 years ago-ish, I happened to befriend a local neurologist, psychiatrist, and she said that when the Chinese bought most of Vancouver, they tore down all the historic buildings because they have no respect for historic buildings. They think that they're old, they're against feng shui, and they should just be removed. So that's of concern to me as a property owner of a historic building here in Grand Forks. Point number three, I'm reminded of the commercial in 2010, which depicted a professor laughing at a room full of Chinese students about the fact that he owned much of America. Some of you may remember this commercial. It's very disconcerting, but unfortunately it's very prophetic, and it's unfortunately depicting the situation we're in right now of a situation in which China has unfortunately already bought the land in question. And so it seems to me hearing of the construction that's already going on this land, the fact that these people have already placed a satellite dish on this land, it seems to me that all this work done by you good people is a distraction to them because they're already pursuing their primary objective, which is to be on the land that they now own, and it appears to me, do whatever they want, which may or may not be conducting surveillance operations. I don't really understand why there's a satellite dish there already. But you told me at the last, Mayor Paczynski, you told me at the last time I was here a month ago, that unlike my understanding of the initial development agreement, I was under the impression that all of your extremely difficult work predicated the land sale. And then at the last meeting, a month ago, I was told they're two separate things. The land has already been sold. And so therefore, it appears that they can do whatever they want as of the change of hands, and they may or may not build this plant, but until that plant may or may not be built, they can do whatever they want, because we have changed the laws to enable them to buy the land by calling it an X property by the city of Grand Forks, thereby overruling North Dakota state law. So I just want you to realize that all this work that you allegedly need to do may just be a mere smokescreen for their real intent, which appears to me to be surveillance. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Barber. Anybody have anything related to the Memorial Village development? Okay, we will close the public hearing on the Memorial Village development. Open up to council for comments.
Mayor, I'll move approval.
We got a motion to approve from President Sandy. Do we have a second? Got a second from Ms. Lunsky. Any further comment on item 3.1? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
3.2, public hearing and determination of protest on request to vacate the southerly 2125 square foot of Independence Avenue located at 628 Reeves Drive.
I would like to recuse myself. This came up way before council was even a glimmer in my eye.
No problem. So if we could get that same motion as earlier, and then with the intention to deny it.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to allow Ms. Lunsky to vote with the intention of voting against it.
Yep. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We got a second from Mr. Veen. So again, a no vote. Please, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion is defeated, so you will be recused from voting, Ms. Nunsky. Please continue, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. As was stated, this has actually been in the queue for more than a couple months. It just takes that long with the vacation process. So with that, it's gone through all the utility companies and city departments. We're recommending approval.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any further comments on item 3.2? I'll open the public hearing now at this time. Anyone here to speak on item 3.2? Okay, public hearing period is closed. Now, any further comment? Council, seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve item 3.2.
Move approval.
Got a motion from Mr. Veen.
Second.
Second from President Sandy. Great, seeing no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously with Lunsky recused.
3.3, public hearing and second reading of an ordinance for annexation of Grand Valley, first edition, located at 62nd Avenue South and South 20th Street.
Again, same thing, Mr. Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mayor. For those new council members, this has been a process of a new development called Grand Valley Edition. We're in the process of moving south of 62nd Avenue South, which is where the Kings Walk Golf Course is at. The previous councils have approved lift station going out in this area. We've approved the rezoning, the plating. This is the next step, which is the annexation. It started actually in April, May timeframe, and is before you now for final action due to the public hearing requirements. This is a little over 90-acre addition to the city out in this area, and it'll be serving single-family and some multifamily in this area between 20th Street and a little to the east of that on the west side of South Washington. So with that, we're recommending approval.
All right, I'm going to open the public hearing first here for item 3.3. Anyone here to speak on item 3.3? Okay, that public hearing period is closed, so we'll open up to any council comment on item 3.3 or motions.
Mayor, I have a question.
Please, Mr. Veen.
I was interested here on the annexation boundaries on both South 20th Street and I think it's, 69th Avenue South. Usually, if you can see above on 62nd, the annexation was some distance south of the road right away. In this case, why didn't we go further west on South 20th Street and south on 69th Street, so we would have some means of assessing improvements to those streets to the benefit of the property owner?
Mayor Buczynski, members of council, and Mr. Veen. Thank you for that question. In the past, when we've done smaller annexations, we've been looking at that 140-foot policy where we have both sides to assess. In this case, we've asked the developer to come in with a larger development. In this case, like we said, 92 acres, 92.15 acres. So we've asked for a larger piece to come in, and in doing so, we didn't take the 140-foot. That identifies really who the shared property owner on the south side is the same developer in this case. On the west side, which is South 20th Street, that landowner is donating his half of the right-of-way to allow us to line up on the South 20th Street. And so in that case, we didn't at the same time also take the 140-foot on that side. So just so you're aware of the reasoning for that.
So, Mr. Brooks, who's going to pay for, how will we assess South 20th Street to the west side or again on the south side, even though of 69? I know that you have the same property owner, but somebody's going to pay for that infrastructure.
Ultimately,
who is going to pay?
Ultimately, obviously, that I think goes to the Special Assessment Commission, but I would anticipate having future specials along those areas. And those developers, we also anticipate coming in sooner once those infrastructure improvements are available to them.
Yeah, but the Special Assessment Commission can only assess it within the boundaries, and there's nobody within the boundaries to assess that. So some of that cost has to go back to who?
I'll maybe let Maureen, but I think that, go ahead.
And this may, Mayor, Councilman Veen, members of the council, and the city engineer can chime in here too if he likes, but this is the annexation. The part of the other processes we'd be setting aside or setting up the special assessment district would also include an area, future special assessments area, so it would be properly spread.
And who covers the cost of the future assessment area in the meantime?
The city would cover the cost of the meantime, and then ultimately the property owner of that area pays those special assessments.
I got a question. Do they pay that with interest? Is there a carrying cost that they cover as well?
They would pay the same amount that everybody would pay based on the benefit assigned, and then they pay interest over time of the special assessment.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Veen?
No.
All right. Any further comments from council on item 3.3? I think I did open the public hearing already, didn't I? Okay. All right. Any motions?
I'll move, Mayor.
Got a motion to approve from President Sandy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Slonsky just beat you, Mr. Kavami, so we'll give a second to Ms. Slonsky. Any further comment on 3.3? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries, what do we got here? 5-1 with Veen dissenting.
3.4 is the public hearing on Title VI LEP plan.
All right, do we have Mr. Bergman? Do we need anything? We'll open up the...
We're here for any questions, Mayor, otherwise you can open the public hearing.
All right, Mr. Bergman's here to speak on that item if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, for now, we'll open the public hearing on item 3.4. Assuming that's a procedural thing for your end there, Mr. Bergman. Public hearing period is closed. We got a motion to approve. This one's pretty perfunctory. Is that true, Mr. Bergman?
Yes.
Give a brief.
It's a Title VI LEP plan. In other words, it has to do with race, color, and national origin of how we use our federal dollars. And then we also have to have a limited English proficiency plan. In other words, if an individual came on our buses that couldn't speak English language, we would have to provide them an interpreter so that they could have that language that they needed to have that language barrier eliminated. So.
And this is a federal requirement in order to access federal funds for the...
This is, yes.
All right.
And we got no questions or anything came into our office at all today either.
All right. So open it up to council for item 3.4. Anyone wish to approve this?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we got a motion from Mr. Veen, and I believe that was a second from President Sandy. Is that correct, President Sandy?
Yes, sir, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
And then 3.5, public hearing on moving permit application to move a storage building from 320 University Avenue to 2001 Dyke Avenue.
Mayor Wojcinski and council members, this is the final step of the moving permit process, and everything has smoothly went through. I didn't get any comments from any of the neighbors. We send, for the new members, we send letters to all the neighbors within 200 feet to move the garage. And there's legal notices.
Sounds pretty straightforward. Any public comment? I'll open the public hearing for item 3.5. Anyone wishing to speak on the item? All right, public hearing period is closed. So we're looking for a motion to approve that application with the storage building.
Approval.
Got a motion to approve? I missed that. Who was the second?
Kavami.
Okay, a second from Mr. Kavami. Seeing no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to 4 action items. I know a number of these have been through. Is there particular items any council members want to pull? Otherwise, we'll consent agenda the rest. So please.
4.2.
4.2. All right, any other items that council members wish pulled for further discussion? All right, so they're looking for a motion to approve items 4.0, 4.1, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, and 4.7. If I get a motion to approve those items. Got a motion from President Sandy. We got a second?
Second.
Second from Kavami. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries unanimously.
4.2, Highway 81 Development and 27th Avenue North Geotechnical Services, Project 8487.
All right, Mr. Veen, I'll let you start for discussion.
Mayor, I think I made all of my arguments at the last committee, the whole meeting on this one, so I'm ready to vote.
Okay, sounds good. We get, guess we'll be looking for a motion from council. Or any
Approval, Mayor.
Got a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Kavami. Any further discussion on item 4.2? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We get 3-2 there. Did I read that right? With, we've got Ms. Osowski and Mr. Veen dissenting. Motion carries. On to 5 information items.
5.1 is your statement of changes in cash balances as of May 31st. And 5.2 is your official results of the June 14th, 2022 general election.
All right, thank you. Now, number 6, we'll open up to citizen comments. Sherry's going to take care of the list tonight.
Okay, Jody Carlson, I think she must have left. She stepped out. She stepped out, okay. Dennis Cadlick. And then I'll let you know when the 3 minutes are up.
Mr. Cadillac, please.
I'm walking very slowly so I don't scare you people. And this is not included in my 3 minutes, dear, because I'd like to apologize to whomever thought I was threatening somebody here 2 weeks ago. And Mr. Sandy, do you recall a phone call you got from me several months ago? Well, I called Mr. Sandy, and he did not know who was calling him. See, you remember this, Mr. Sandy. And I said, why don't you just move to China? I'll even come over and help you pack. And then Mr. Sandy was saying, who is this? Who is this? I said, you should know who this is. And he did not. So I told him who it was. Because I told Mr. Sandy that I was not calling to upset him. And then Mr. Sandy repeatedly asked me if I wanted to scream at him. And I told him, no, I did not want to scream at you. And he even offered to meet with me. But like I told him, I felt bad about him. And Mr. Mayor, the first time I met you, I commented on how you dress. Is that not correct? I told you that you dress well. Do you recall what I said to you at Red Pepper? Would you please?
Well, Mr. Cadillac, you said, enjoy the dinner with your family, and then you proceeded to come up here and tell me that my family was in danger. I appreciate that you are apologizing, but that's not proper discourse, sir. It's not. I don't care what you think. I'm glad you're apologizing today, but that's not proper discourse. You don't bring people's families in this and talk about how bad things are coming to them, sir. I do not do that.
Sir, I was not speaking towards that way, and most of the people I've talked to about that understood it the way I said it, and I was not threatening you or your family. I would not ever do that. What I was referring to is because of what has all created by this Fufang deal in Grand Forks, I was concerned that the fellow students may start saying something to the other students. And like I say, if you misunderstood that, I extremely apologize, because that is not where it was at. The matter of fact, all the people in my group, every single one of them, if one of them ever threatened any use or any property use, I would turn them in. We are not here to threaten nobody. We are not here to cause any problems. What we'd like to do is get this Fufang deal resolved. And that's all we've ever been here for, and that's all we're going to be here for. We are not going to threaten nobody. We never have, and we never will. That is not part of what we're doing. The only point we're coming from is our love for the city we live in.
Mr. Cadillac, that's 3 minutes.
Thank you. I do appreciate you clarifying that. I do appreciate that, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'd appreciate, the next time somebody refers to the FBI, if they'd also check on my clearance, because I used to be cleared for the missile silos. I don't need to threaten nobody. But I appear to be a threat only because I'm not in favor of what you guys are doing. It's cost us nothing but money. Because every time you guys do something, we have to hire an attorney. And then you guys hire an attorneys. And we, the taxpayers, are paying for them. Matter of fact, when Mr. Todd got picked on here by Sandy, I stood up for him at a couple meetings ago.
Okay, thank you.
When somebody commented about his socks, I stuck up for him. I don't threaten people. I try to keep the peace.
Okay, thank you for your
And
comment.
what I see going on here, I would say that what you people are doing is causing a lot of problems that do not have to be in this community. And I'm concerned for the community.
Okay.
And I really think you guys should take a step back and see if the way you're going about this is the right way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cadillac.
Thank you.
Jody Carlson?
Ms. Carlson, please.
Thank you. If I can just not be on the timer for this, just to back up what Mr. Cadillac just said, I remember hearing him make that comment, and when he said something about, too bad for your kids to grow up in, I think about that for my own kids and for my grandkids. I don't want them growing up in a community or any place that they don't have a voice, and that's what I understood him to say when he said that. I didn't take that as a threat. And then just to clarify, the attorney that was on here a little bit earlier, so she is the lawyer that was representing the city as far as not having a CFIUS review, correct?
We hired her to give us information on how to proceed.
Okay. Because the part of that I wonder about too is fighting us tooth and nail, and now I hear from you, Mr. Gosted, that there's been an application made to dismiss the cases, the lawsuits, as far as the petition. My God, how far are you going to go? I mean, really, truly. Okay, now I'll get to my agenda here. We come here every week with information that contradicts the information that you guys, ladies, welcome to the View. Welcome to council, by the way. So anything I have to say tonight, please don't take it personally, but thank you for stepping up and joining the council. So we come here every week with information that contradicts what we're being told by the city, and yet we are still trying to be silenced. We have the proof of so many lies that you have told us, and you know it. I have a black bag right back there that could probably shut this whole thing down in 1 minute, Mr. Gosted. You have not done due diligence, and I'm not an attorney, but I play one on TV once in a while, your due diligence with those agreements has not met the required, and when we explain to you ladies the requirements for a pilot agreement, talk to me about the requirements for a pilot agreement, and I will be more than willing to share that with you, because there's quite a few things that we're missing. I want to say, and Mr. Cadillac stepped up here, and he mentioned something, and I missed the very first part of it, but here's my understanding, because when Mr. Spicer went to, the other day on Thursday, I had a knock on my door. I like afternoon naps. I was sitting in my recliner, sleeping, and get this bang, bang, bang on my door. I look out my window, and there's a gray car out there, just regular gray car. Two gentlemen standing at my door. One's got a sidearm and a holster, plain clothes. I open up my door, and I'm like, yeah, and they say, are you Jody Carlson? And I said, yeah, and they said, may we step in and visit with you? And I thought something happened to my kids or my mom. I didn't know what. Yeah, come on, step in and visit with me. I didn't know what was going on, that the police are going to be showing up at my house. Anyway, it was Sergeant Jennings, and what I find out now was also someone from the FBI that show up at my house. They come into my house, and let me please preface this. Last year, I was on another media site where there was a local gentleman in town who was harassing and berating and being terrible to women. They would block him. He would find their emails. They'd block him. He would find their, he would find the phone numbers of them. I called and reported to police. What I heard from the police, from both dispatch as well as the officer after begging to come out, that we do not get involved with social media. Well, apparently they do, and they came about a Facebook post that was very clear what I posted, and I'm not sure who reported it and what all went on. When Mr. Spicer visited the police department later on that night, he was told by an officer that was there when he asked the question, who do I contact regarding how to find out who contacted the police on them, he was told to ask the city council. So I don't know what's to that. I've made no threats. If you want to send the police and the FBI to my house to try to intimidate me, it won't work. So if that's a plan or a plan to continue that is certainly not going to work for you.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I also heard, another thing, my husband and I went to the police department this morning because we wanted to talk to Chief Nelson. And when we went there, one of the things that we asked, because Officer Jennings is the same officer that was involved with the petitions, in helping with the petitions, and this is the first time I have ever heard it. We asked the police officer, and I have it on recording if you'd like to hear it, who was it that ordered the police to be involved in the petitions? And the answer was Mr. Gosted. And I'm very curious about what is his involvement that gives him the authority to involve the police. And like I say, I have it on a recording.
Okay.
My other question
Ms.
is,
Wilson, please, your time has passed. I'll give you a few more seconds, please. Ma'am, we'll stop this meeting. Ma'am.
You have the exemption from the Federal Department of Border Security regarding FUFOM. Because if you also would like to...
Cut the mic. Ma'am, we've been very respectful. We've got a time frame. You've been doubly past that.
I contacted North Dakota.
Ma'am, your time period is over. There's other people that wish to speak.
This is important for you to know.
Ma'am, your time to speak is completed.
And the thing that they told me is even if FUFOM is not directly importing, they have found a company named First Biotech Inc. that within this United States of America is doing illegal imports of products from that Xinjiang region.
Thank you, ma'am.
You really need to have, that is the only proper review. A letter from the teacher isn't going to cut it on that. You know pictures have come out, you know videos have come out, and as I said to you earlier, we're not getting a state-of-the-art facility, and you know it, and I know it, and now the city knows it, and they're not very happy. There's been violations of both the development and the pilot agreements, and you know it, I have the proof. And if you want to claim differently, go ahead. I have it. I've talked to every state agency involved in this. I'd like you to put a motion on the table to terminate this project. And then I would like to say that, and this is my last comment, thank you. City Council, you are not doing your job. And I wish those other gentlemen were here because I would love to look them in the eye as well. You are up there in those chairs to represent the voices of the people, and I hope the new people that have joined the council understand that, and hopefully they will have ward meetings where they can actually understand the voices of the people and what the people want. You have done everything that you possibly can next to tying us up and preventing us from coming to these meetings, although that has been threatened to me to be taken away by the police. You have failed in your jobs. And Mayor Bochansky and President Sandy, I ask for your resignations. I will give you some time to think about that. The city, not just me, the city, the people of this city
are asking for your resignations. And if we do not get an answer soon that you will decide to do that, that we will be working on a recall petition to have you removed from office.
Craig Spicer.
Mr. Spicer, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Mr. Mayor, City Council, and welcome to the new members. I hope your run is very effective and conscientious, because we need that with just common sense attitude. So, welcome aboard. This mayor, this city council, or most of it, unwittingly and with total disregard, brought this embarrassment project, Fufang, that's wrong. That's wrong in many ways, politically, with many pollution concerns, and morally, to me, to my family, to my business, my town, and my country. What your motives are or were, I really don't care. Although I think I know. I have seen conflict of interest, abuse of city power, harassment, belittlement, a lot of belittlement of concerned citizens because they don't agree with this issue. It's totally wrong. Manipulation processes and behind door tactics, all right here, right in front of this council for the last 5 or 6 months that this issue has been going on. Now, we're dealing with this project and this mess the only way we know how, and that's by defending our constitutional rights. So thank you for that. The Fufang project has been throwing up red flags, many red flags, to the citizens of this community since it publicly announced the list of concerns is long. Water usage, wastewater, air quality, odor, traffic, the cost of infrastructure, mostly to long-time business people and residents. Tax incentives to Fufang. Annexation, manipulated, enforced annexation through Home Rule Charter. And the hottest topic, national security, the biggest concern. I don't have time to go through all of these concerns, but I would like to hit on a couple of them. National security. Last Friday, CNBC published an article titled, Chinese Company Purchase of North Dakota Farmland Raises National Security Concerns in Washington. I would like to bring your attention to comments made by members of Senate Intelligence Committee. The Democratic Chairman, Senator Mark Warner, and the Republican Vice Chairman, Senator Marco Rubio, both expressed their opposition to this project. Opposition to this project. I repeat it because nobody ever seems to listen to them. They wouldn't listen to us, and now they won't listen to their senators or their congressmen. Senator Mark Warner said the Senate Intelligence Committee has been loudly sounding the alarm about counterintelligence threat posed by the People's Republic of China. Can I have a few minutes?
Yes, please finish the document.
I've got a little bit more. I'll go through it quick. I want you to listen to it.
Okay, thank you.
The People's Republic of China. We should be seriously concerned about Chinese investment in locations close to sensitive sites such as military bases around the U.S. Senator Marco Rubio said it is dangerous, foolish, short-sighted to allow the Chinese Communist Party and its proxies to purchase land near U.S. military installations. In the same article, our own North Dakota Senator Kevin Kramer again expressed his disagreement with this project. He stated, I think we grossly underappreciate how effective they are at collecting information, collecting data, and using it in non-nefarious ways. And so I just soon not have the Chinese Communist Party doing business in my backyard. I would like to point out that Mr. Kramer is U.S. Senate Committee on Armed Forces. Now, these new statements from experts publicly expressed, I ask you, do you have any reservations about this project? Mr. Mayor, quickly, please.
Yeah, we've got CFIUS looking into it, that we've gotten to the experts on the subject, so I think that's a pretty good route to go.
too, though.
Okay, moving on.
Please.
Mr. Sandy,
Go up the counter.
do you have reservations about this?
Okay, Mr. Spicer, please. Any further
Okay,
comments?
well, typically, that's the same process. We ask the questions, nobody answers. But when you get in front of a TV camera, you answer their questions. Really not fair. We're the citizens that elected you, we deserve an answer. Those of us that have been attending meetings and voicing our concerns regarding national security have been laughed at and mocked by the council. Hence, I just said it. I hope you can appreciate the validity of what we have been saying and the questions we have been asking. If you continue not to have any concerns after hearing comments from high-ranking officials and after citizens have repeatedly voiced their worries, are you going to resign? Or do you need to be publicly recalled from your positions? This is not the federal government's fault. The council and the city leaders continually throw out the words due diligence. And yet here we are. Our city has now gained national attention due to the lack of due diligence. To now backtrack and to try to spin the narrative so that blame goes to the federal government is ridiculous and reflects poorly on you as leaders of Grand Forks. The decisions that you have made to get us where we are have been made by you, not the folks in Washington. Annexation. From my standpoint, the whole annexation was manipulated, forced process. The city and EDC started this whole project back in June. I believe it was not made public until November 21. After Grand Forks was chosen by Fufang, that's a lot of time for the city lawyers to be working on and studying the legalities of Home Rule Charter and North Dakota Century Code in order to do this project in their favor. Did anyone stop to think about the impact this will have on local established businesses along Highway 81 or the impact that next generation of small businesses doing along that corridor? This project is putting my family business in jeopardy with little or no benefit. Conclusion, this project is too risky. We have too much to lose. It needs to be discontinued.
Thank you, Mr. Spicer.
I have one more comment. In God I trust, in God we trust. God bless America.
Mr. Coachman, please.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, City Council, new city people. It was like, wow, this is my first city council, like fireworks, right? Yesterday was the 4th. But what I wanted to say is, last week in this hall here, retired Judge Al Bolsher, I believe, gave a overview, or actually a good summation of the oath of office. I've been in the military for over 20 years, and I heard a lot of different, even after, I heard people give the oath of office, and what he gave last week was probably the best I ever heard. And Judge, if you're watching, I'd like to have a cup of coffee and shake your hand if I have the opportunity. But I wanted to say, the oath of office is something very precious even to me, and I hope each and every one will have a some type of memory as he turned, look over here, and said, the oath of office is really important. Why I'm here tonight is I would like the council, if you could approve, I'd like to be on the agenda for the 18th of this month, if I could. I would appreciate it if you let me do it. I did send the paperwork in saying I would like to be on the agenda, but there was certain requirements. But I know being on the city council out in Larimore, that if the city council can approve whatever they would like on the agenda. So I'm asking the city council if they could approve me, or even tell me no, at least something.
You're asking the city council.
I'm asking the city council.
Mr. Coachman, this is comment time. Do you have any comments, sir?
No, that's what I'm asking, to be on. That's what I want to do. I want to be on the agenda for the 18th.
Any further comments?
Could I be on the agenda for the 18th?
And that's a question. Do you have any comments tonight, sir? We've gone through this many times before. This is.
But I never asked to be on the, so in other words, what I'm hearing right now is
make comments.
The council has no authority. It's all in you. If you don't approve it, if you don't say it, they won't say nothing, because you guys will make a first or a second on anything else that is brought up, but you will not. I'm asking for an approval to be on the agenda on the 18th, or even in denial, but say something. That's what the council's for. You have the authority as council people to make decisions what to do. So, Mr. Sandy, yes or no? Mr. V? I can't hear you.
Sandy says no.
Sandy says no. Mr. V?
Any further comments, Mr.
Well, I have a couple of things.
Your time is getting close, please.
Okay. Mr. Gostad, is there a court date yet for the petition? For
Mr. Coachman, again, comments. I know it's hard. Comments, please.
Oh.
Mr. Coachman, that is 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Coachman. Well, one other thing I have. This weekend, there's 3 large boilers that were coming from Fort Lupton, Colorado, coming here. My comment is, who's paying for that? Is it already paid for, or what?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coachman.
No idea.
I guess I have to give a question to TV.
Yeah.
So if they answer on TV, but they won't answer here.
Chuck Stewart?
Mr. Stewart, please.
Get ready to pull a fire alarm again, Brandon. I'm Chuck.
I'm a director of the Sons of Liberty. I'm speaking for about 500 of my brothers and sisters from Northwest North Dakota, Williston, Mohall, Botno, Jamestown, and Devils Lake. We love America, and we're a drop-dead, spill-your-lunchbox in love with North Dakota. And we wonder what I wouldn't call you people that would give you more respect than I have for you. I consider you traitorous thugs. Your traitorous activities are finally coming to light. This is my 3rd time here at this commission. 300 miles one way each time with many comrades. Your secret activities of trying to set up the CCP-run company 14 miles in direct sight of my Air Force base pisses me off. And my group of patriots pisses them off. And I'm happy to say the Department of Defense and several news agencies and radio personalities are all pissed off at you too. What's with that rusty junk heat exchangers and other junk sitting at the old Pillsbury property? California said, get this crap out of my sight, take it to North Dakota, because it won't comply with our EPA laws. State of the art, you're fools. Blue Fang CCP is looking for our tanker air-to-air fueling capabilities and technology, which is here at Grand Forks. CCP is looking for our UAS unmanned aerial system capabilities and technology. I ain't very smart, unlike you. I would say the CCP would love this technology that could be gotten from a corn mill 14 miles in direct sight from a United States Air Force base that has all of these. And throw in the intercontinental ballistic missile technology for icing. To do anything they would like to do to the United States of America, Taiwan, South Korea. You're all traitors.
Apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly for the next gentleman. Gerald Garrick?
Mr. Gork, please.
Thank you. May I have some of that? It's been a long day. Am I gonna get time for this too, or is this off the clock right here?
No, I'll wait till you start speaking.
Okay. I've got a lot of information I'm sure it's gonna do over 3 minutes, because I had a lot of it from last week that you guys pulled the famous fire drill on us, so you wouldn't let us speak. We appreciate that. But one thing I gotta know is that when you guys annexed land in Faulkner Township, I wanna know the procedure that you did by that, because from what I know about township stuff, which is quite a little, you did it illegally. You cannot annex land the way you did it. So we'll figure that out later. I don't have time for an answer for that right now, I'm sure. So your pilot program that you have for Foo Fang, Isn't that illegal to give to a foreign entity? Pilot program? I'm just saying, you already give them plenty of money to do this, right? Why are you giving them more with a pilot program? Tax-free in 20 years, $82 million to build this thing? What do they got in the game? What kind of money do they got in the game for this? Nothing. Why? Again, you guys can't answer it. Why would we give China the money to do this? Well, somebody. Mr. Gossett, can you answer anything? You're the attorney? You represent
citizen comments, please make comments.
You represent the council, you represent these guys, you represent them, you're making money on all sides of the aisle, aren't you? Well, how do you get a right to even be here? I don't get it. Anyways, you have CNBC reporting on this roof painting being illegal activity. You have the Project Mercury. All you guys hear about Project Mercury, I'm sure? No? Dumb looks. Project Mercury is operated air base right out of Grand Forks Air Force Base right here. It is part of the Pacific Prime to China. They need your drone information right here in Grand Forks Air Force Base to deliver to China, Taiwan, South Korea, North Korea. That's what this is all about. That's what this food frame thing is all about. It's to infiltrate and get our information for your drone program, which, Mr. Sandy, you've been involved with for 20-some years, haven't you? No comment again. I mean, if treason was ever an issue, you're fully aware what treason brings you, correct? Yeah, yawn at me. Yo, I wish you were here, you son of a... You are a piece of work, boy, you are a piece of work. You know, Eric Schuler has worked for a Chinese program, and apparently he runs this one too. He's been involved with Chinese for 20-some years, right? Maybe even longer. He's been with Ingredients Incorporated Foods. They're a China-owned company. Now he's involved with Food Thing and Food Thing. They're a China-owned company. Department of Homeland Security is worried about what's going to happen with these guys moving in here. Grand Forks Air Force Base is huge with our Department of Homeland Security. They have 7 squadrons for support throughout the world. Run right here, Grand Forks Air Force Base. The refueling ring of support is right here. The nuclear information is right here. So much information right here, Grand Forks Air Force Base. And you are putting North Dakota at risk for all of this because of one food frame company that you all are involved with and have ties with? What gives, guys? What gives? Give it up, get rid of it, or we'll get rid of you, period.
Mr. Gore.
Thanks for
Brian Scabble.
And that was not a threat, that was he'll do it legally.
Mr. Saddle,
Okay, I just have about 5 points. First of all, China is not our friend. China doesn't even like their own people. You see how they get treated. I guess the number one point I'd like to make is a foreign entity, a foreign country should never own land in our United States. Never. Another thing we should not have any input with is our food. Okay, this is corn, we can argue food or not, but we saw what happened in COVID in South Dakota. JBS Smithfield closed down plants, controlling our food. Energy. We're going to supply them with a lot of energy, be it water, natural gas, anything else. They shouldn't have anything to do with that. Another thing is our medicines and our pharmaceuticals. What did China do? They're the ones that got us COVID. And then they tried to make stuff to make money on the backside. And communications. They are going to be intercepting communications here. And they probably already are. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Mr. Scavo.
Dr. Barber?
I think she
left? Okay. Jason Patrick?
Oh, I got that one. Mr. Patrick, please.
Mayor Brzezinski, how you doing?
Howdy.
Good to see you again after seeing you on, what was that, Friday, Thursday? With the
Tuesday.
SDA? It's been a long week. First thing, welcome to council. As our friend here said, starting off with fireworks, aren't you? Yeah. Nothing like a crucible under fire, right? recommendation to you. If you've ever heard of Jocko Willemick, he has a book called Extreme Ownership. I think anybody in a leadership position would do very, very well to pick up that book and give it a good read. Now, there may be some stuff where it's like, well, this is military, how does it apply? I promise you, he will explain how all this stuff applies to leadership. And I don't say that lightly. Okay. I've got to hand it to you guys. You guys have managed to actually get Congress to agree on something with the Senate Intel Committee, both of the Dem and the GOP, people saying that, man, this is a bad idea. So that's something historic, and I do want to commend you for that. My final point is your counsel for the CFIUS. And I have a reasonable amount of faith in her. She's a member of the JAG Corps, so she's Army. I trust her a bit more than civilian lawyers. No offense. But it sounded like, correct me if I am wrong, please, it sounded like she recommended submitting voluntary CFIUS review. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean,
and
she just spoke on it tonight.
Right, yeah, the sound quality was atrocious, because I was listening to it on my way in here from work. So she recommended that after you guys have had experts here months ago recommending the same thing, as well as people who read up on this stuff and within the community recommending the same thing. I want to make, is that correct?
I'll try to answer this for you. And you've got a land transaction that we were not a part of. That is what she is recommending that they do.
Okay, because you've brought in,
not involved in it, in the land transaction.
You brought in a CFIUS lawyer.
Yes, at the request of many people.
And they're saying that you should submit a voluntary CFIUS review after that has been recommended to you before in the past. Is that correct?
I guess I don't know how to answer that. We contacted a lawyer and give us...
No, somebody speaking here at the dais, speaking to you, has said this should probably go before CFIUS. How long did it take you?
How long? We hired a lawyer to do it.
I've got nothing more.
Thank you, Mr. Pastrick.
Allison Spicer?
Ms. Spicer?
Me? Yeah, Allison Spicer.
Would you like me to state my address?
No, please.
Okay, you know who I am by now? Okay, so Mr. Baczynski, you said that you didn't state anything about Phase 2, correct?
About what?
Phase 2 of the project?
Phase 2, originally it talked about building the plant in 2 phases, and they changed it to just doing it in 1 phase.
Okay,
so
but
yes.
you said numerous times, there's no Phase 2. And I have the
Not
testimony,
anymore.
I have the testimony of you from the House Appropriations Committee in Bismarck, North Dakota on November 10th. Right here, Phase 2. So again, public, City of Grand Forks, you're a liar. That's all you do.
Why are you laughing?
Ma'am,
Why are you laughing?
Because there was 2 phases. They were building
Because
it in
you
2
are the most
phases, and they changed it
nefarious
to 1.
city council
Please.
in North Dakota. Okay? You
information
have
can
also
change,
said,
ma'am.
Mr. Baczynski,
Please continue.
that if any government official was not okay with this, that you would stop it. Okay? Let's see. Senator Newhouse, Senator Cotton, Senator Rubio, all these people. Ray, the director of the FBI, they're not for this. Again, you said that you would stop it. So again, you're a liar. And you need to step down. You need to step down from your position. Because you do not represent Grand Forks the way that we want it to be represented. Okay? Just be gone. No one wants you here.
Step down.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, that's all we have for citizen comments tonight. Moving on to 7, approval of minutes and bills.
7.1 is your vendor list and engineer's estimate as is presented.
All right, can we get a motion to approve the vendor list and engineer's estimate? Got a motion to approve, do we have a second? We got a second from Ms. Lunsky. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The vendor list and engineer's estimate is approved. Moving on to 8, any comments tonight, City Administrator, Mr. Phelan?
Mayor Buchansky, members of City Council, just want to highlight a couple meetings next week. After the Committee of the Whole meeting next week, Monday, we are going to have a joint East Grand Forks City Council meeting. It's going to be centered on the two bridges, one on Merrifield and the other the Intercity Bridge. And I know Councilmember Lunsky, I think they're both Elks and 32nd. So we've asked the MPO and Stephanie Halfer, who's the new MPO Executive Director, to provide an overview of where we're at with both of those bridges. And so she's going to provide a briefing on that. I have also invited, through Ms. Halford, the MPO Executive Board. The MPO Executive Board is made up of City Council members and by also both counties, both Polk and Grand Forks County. And the importance of that is Merrifield is in Grand Forks County and Polk County. So we want them to take up the mantle on the Merrifield, not only the bridge, but the interchange. So they're going to brief both of those and really get some feedback and some direction from both city councils. We will do it down here on the floor, and we'll invite the MPO Executive Board members too. And I will also, Mayor Buchansky, invite Commission Chair Falk too, just because of the Merrifield. So that should be a good briefing. We'll do it around 6 o'clock, plus or minus, after the Committee of the Whole. The other meeting will be on Wednesday, and that'll be our annual joint City Council Air Center Commission meeting. And so there will be a tour at 11 a.m. and then at 11:45 there'll be a lunch, and then at 12 noon will be the briefing. And so we're very fortunate to have the Alair Center and also with the group that's running it. And so it's been 5 years since they've been running it. And so a lot of good things that they want to update you on in that vein. Finally, on Monday, July 18th, we will be presenting Mayor Buchansky's FY 2023 budget at that City Council meeting. And there will also be a wastewater interconnect advisory meeting on Monday, July 25th before COW. So July will be busy with lots of briefings, lots of updates, and lots of budget meetings. So we welcome you, and thanks for all your leadership. And just so you know, I think there's been a lot of discussion, and the great part of the development agreement and things that we went over tonight, those are things that we do really have to come back and demonstrate that this Phu Phong Wet Corn Mill is a good project, and we continue to do that every Monday that we're here. So there's a lot of due diligence to come in. There'll be a lot of decision making to happen between now and through the fall and winter. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Moving on to Mayor and City Council member comments. Mrs. Sosky, any comments tonight, ma'am? Thank you. Ms. Lunsky, any comments? All right, I believe we got Mr. Kavami online. Any comments tonight this evening, sir?
No, thank you.
Okay, President Sandy, any comments?
Sorry, Mayor, thank you. Yes, certainly I wanted to say that it's a lot different not having Councilmember Dockler and Mock with us, but certainly I appreciate them. I'm happy to welcome Ms. Osowski and Ms. Lunsky to the team. They are going to be integral parts of our team, and I appreciate that they would step up and run. So thank you, Mayor.
Yay!
Thank you, President Sandy. Just for my comments, again, this is, I appreciate people coming and giving their viewpoints. I think it's helpful. In the end, whether the project happens or not, it's been made better from people coming. It's been tough at times, but I do appreciate people coming. I appreciate their opinions. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. I look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make my first motion.
All right, we got a motion from Ms. Lunsky. Ms. Osowski, would you like to make it? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.